So our topic today couldn't really be anything else but the Buddha's Enlightenment Day, with being December 8th. In the Zen tradition, in which I'm practiced, then in many temples, monasteries and practice centers around the world, today would be the culmination of the what's called the Rohatsu Sesshin, or a 7-day retreat that would end on December the 8th. And it's traditionally the retreat where the utmost effort is made in order to make as much, this is where words get difficult, make as much progress on our path to enlightenment. You know, the Buddha is really the great the great standard and archetype of what's possible in terms of our practice, which is a practice of looking into the reality of our human life, as simple and as difficult as that task may be. And the Buddha's realization is one which has powerfully echoed and been carried down the centuries and millennia into this present experience, this present day now. I'm sure many, if not all of you, are familiar with something of the Buddha's story. So, but in short, after being born into a position of good status, so power and some privilege of the day, the Buddha from an early age was not content with a life of material gain and position, and was from a young age had a deep question that wanted to understand, why is there old age, sickness and death? Why is there suffering in the human experience? Where does it come from? And then how can that suffering be assuaged? And so for himself began a long journey which involved leaving behind a life of apparent security, or the security that can be found in fortuitous circumstances, and it said climbed the palace wall and went off into the forests of northern India and began an earnest practice of meditation and asceticism too. Practices which were already old practices of the day. Meditation didn't begin with the Buddha. Who knows how long ago meditation began? Who was the first person that... I wonder who the first person who sat for 30 minutes was, you know? It's like just somebody, like, I don't know, right? It's like that, back into the distant beginnings of hominids and even before. You know, human beings, we have this curious blessing / curse of this consciousness, which we can see or see ourselves and the world, and we separate that. We're aware of ourselves. A curious trick of evolution, perhaps. You know, something, a grand experiment that we're all in the midst of. But being able to see into the appearance of this self in an impermanent body and world of circumstances is the great challenge of our human life. It can be avoided, hidden, displaced in many different ways, and gosh, you know, the world tries to offers us many different paths to try to do that, but none of those paths ultimately lead to lasting satisfaction. the Buddha started out on his journey to try to look for something that would be lasting in nature in terms of peace and liberation, practicing what were methods of the time. It said that he became a wonderful meditation practitioner and was offered to be a meditation teacher to succeed his teacher in a couple of different lineages of meditation, but he clearly wasn't in it for that purpose. And then practiced great austerities, so much so that he became so weakened physically that he fell into a river and had to be rescued to avoid drowning, and was pulled from the river, and then offered a meal of rice and some milk, which saved his life and revived his spirit so much, but was also marked an enormous failure along the path of asceticism. It was believed very much in that day that if one was to weaken the body, that it would strengthen the emergence of the spirit. And so restrict food, restrict comfort. But those practices are still practiced to this day, distant corners of the world. But finally, the Buddha, after being revived somewhat, comes back to the core practice, of the only practice, of sitting meditation. It said that he decided to sit under the Bodhi tree, which is a good move if you're going to sit for 7 days on the plains of northern India. Then having a shade of a good tree above you is a smart move. Right? He hadn't lost his wits. Decided to sit there, but not move, like with this firm resolve to sit and not move until his life's question was answered. Great resolve. So still in these retreats now, in places all over the world, people will recommit to that. I will sit and look deeply into this nature of who am I? What is this? What is this life? And it said that he did so for these several days. The perhaps apocryphal legend tells us how birds nested in his hair and spiders made webs in his beard. Right? Until eventually, after all these long days and nights, and working through a lot of the great distractions that the mind can bring in. We might be familiar, I'm sure all of us are familiar with the distractions of the mind. Right? When we sit meditation. Like from my vantage point, I look up, I'll glance at the clock just because I'm also kind of ostensibly keeping time here, and look, and then everybody's sitting so still, quiet. And it just sort of reminds me, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, kind of feel my glasses slide down my nose. And at some point, they're going to fall off my face, so I guiltily do this. No one else is moving, 50, 60 people. And so the Buddha sits for these many days, facing and working through all of these distractions. And it said that eventually opens his eyes on the morning of the 7th day and sees the morning star Venus. And we can imagine that. I like to imagine that scene in my mind's eye, of opening the eyes after long sitting of meditation. Sitting through the deep, dark night, too, for many nights in a row. And sitting through the deep, dark night in the, perhaps the forests of northern India, is not that's a risky thing to do. Something might come along and eat you. Right? Good for keeping attention. Gosh, the tradition of Buddhism has some bold examples of people sitting in meditation. Just a brief digression. It's Zen Master Hakuin in Japan said he would go into his temple graveyard of monks who were buried and sit at night in the winter and to test his resolve and his ability to be able to sit in those cold temperatures in meditation. And he said sometimes the wolves would come and check him out. And in one night he sat very still, and one of the wolves walked up, sniffed him, and then licked his face. And then walked away. So anyway, I'm not recommending this. Not recommending it as a practice, but it does speak to having, just great resolve to really sit. Because we can be, perhaps a lot of what comes to challenge us is internal, more so than what is external. Here we have wonderful external circumstances. Right? We have a group of people, friendly people. We sit quietly, there's a trust and a friendliness. And so, but then there's the internal world that is unfolding. And perhaps there are many distractions. The Buddha opens his eyes, sees a morning star, it says, and is enlightened. In my tradition, in this tradition of Zen in which I've practiced, it says, it goes back so many years, it said the Buddha exclaimed, "Wonder of wonders, I, all beings, the great earth, are the wisdom and virtue of the awakened one to thusness." Quite a declaration. Wonder of wonders, I, all beings, the great earth, are the wisdom and virtue of the awakened one to thusness. That's remembered as the Buddha's lion's roar, the great roar, as a kind of declaration of enlightenment that includes all of us, everything in the whole earth. You can't get much more broader than that. I mean, maybe now we could add the solar system and the Milky Way and the great neighborhood and we could go even more universal. But for the times, that was universal enough. I, all beings, the great earth, are the wisdom and virtue of the awakened one. It's this extraordinary declaration. We all are, everyone, originally and intrinsically awake, enlightened, present and aware, complete as we are now. That's the fundamental mind ground that the Buddha points to. Nothing lacking intrinsically, but often obscured and appears hidden relatively. We all live our lives of where we gather conditioning with everything that ever happened to us, right? And that leaves a mark. Okay? And sometimes when we sit, that will unfold, that will still play. But intrinsically, at the core, the Buddha declares all beings, the great earth, everyone, without exception, is the wisdom and virtue of the awakened one, is awake. Those words, we have those words there, wisdom and virtue too. Original virtue, or originally, not distorted, flawless. The awakened one. This is enlightenment. But you like I often see the morning star. It's been particularly obvious in the mountains at Yokoji recently. There's a beautiful moon, and then Venus right next. You couldn't set it up any better. Then you turn around and you're like, oh my gosh, there's Jupiter. It's this beautiful night sky. But when we look and you see Venus hanging in the sky, are you enlightened? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe, right? Hard to say. The Buddha had seen the morning star of Venus countless times already, and yet there was no great declaration. And we can imagine, though, if we say that the Buddha sees the morning star, in one sense, nothing special. How many times do we glance at the moon? It's beautiful, but maybe not so remarkable. We've seen it 1,000 times. Right? Sometimes we're only stirred by something that appears different, like a particular moon, a harvest moon, or a great full moon, or an eclipse. Right? Something that stands out. But this was for regularly seeing the morning star. If you see it, that's our usual human position. We see things. I see you, you see me, we see all of these things. But there's that sense of difference, there's that sense of separation and distance. And that's our conventional reality. That's a conventional way of seeing. Where we see ourselves and we see other, normal, everyday human experience. But what is actually going on there in reality? Are self and other, are subject and object divided and distant? Another way that we can look at this is the Buddha opens his eyes and the morning star sees the Buddha. Now something has happened, something a little different. Now we can turn it around and say that the Buddha is seen by the morning star. But when we gather together, when we sit in this way and meditate, rather than it being me, I, seeing and experiencing things. Me, I is always seeing and experiencing things, but me, I is always concerned with preference, attachment and aversion. This is what the Buddha kindly pointed out. What we see, we like to compare one thing to another, and whether it's desirous or not. This is just, again, this is kind of human condition 101, right? We're preferential beings in that way. Things that we like, things that we don't. And we bring that into our meditation. How is this sit going? How am I doing right now? Am I enjoying this? Am I not? Is it difficult? Is it easy? But when the morning star sees the Buddha, those preferences are stripped away, are dissolved. And you're seen, the Buddha is seen. In the same way that when we sit here now, we can switch that around rather than what I see or how I label or describe or define this. That's useful when it's used appropriately. But if we really truly open the lens, if we're truly present, then we're being, all of us, all at once, are being seen, are being experienced. So we can say that, maybe the morning star sees the Buddha. But if we zoom out even broader, we zoom out broader and we can imagine the scene of the Buddha after long effort, after years of practice and toil, disappointment, frustration and failure. After long practice and a final commitment toward enlightenment, see him sitting there under the Bodhi tree that had been waiting for him all of these long years to show up. And then you see the plains of northern India at that time and perhaps foothills of the Himalayas all around. And the beautiful dawn breaking across the sky. And the morning star hung in the sky. And this whole landscape, all of it, all at once. Everything seen together. No division. Complete. And there's really no problem. That's as much enlightenment as you ever need. When the world in its completeness, including this one here, is seen, is truly seen and allowed and welcomed. And all of the problems, the difficulties, the challenges, all of the suffering, all of the dukkha, even if just for a moment, falls away. And you just sit, and you're free, and alive, and it's extraordinary. And everyone is that. That's why we practice, to see that, to see who you already are, and always have been from the very beginning. You know, the great irony of Dharma practice is nothing to attain, nothing to gain. You know, that sounds like, oh wow, well, why would I do that? From a standpoint of conventional reality, like why would you do this? And yet to discover something that we've forgotten, something that was obscured, something original in nature that you had from the beginning, when your eyes first opened and found the world, and the world found you. You know, that basic, intrinsic completeness, which is wise in nature, and even virtuous in nature. And so it said that the Buddha, after achieving this great awakening, which is common to all, was at first felt that this can't be taught. This can't, how do you put this into words? But after wandering for some time, came to the conclusion to try to share something. And then on meeting his former fellow practitioners who had turned their back on him, they saw him and beheld him, and you ever get that feeling when you meet a true person who's greatly present, awake and alive? They've got a vibe. There's a vibe. There's something there. There's something there. And they saw the Buddha, and yeah, okay, this guy's realized something. What is it? And then the Buddha embarks on 40 years of teaching, trying to put into words. And the Buddha was an extraordinary person in the way that, in many ways, but in a way that to be able to formulate teachings into something clear and concise, that has a linear progression, that maps reality well, that is very difficult to do. That's why we're still borrowing his teachings today. Right? The Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. And recently I was looking at and we did a class series on the 6 paramis. And we're going to get into that into the new year as well. We're going to look at the 10 paramis, different systems and different traditions. Right? 6 paramis of Mahayana Zen. It was Nagarjuna, the great philosopher and practitioner in the early 3rd, 4th century India, taught on these. He was asked by a local king, many years after the Buddha in the same tradition. Basically, if you have to sum up the teachings of Buddhism, sum it up for me. Like the command of a ruler. This guy's busy. There's a kingdom to take care of. People need to be fed. So sum it up for me. And Nagarjuna presented these six paramis of the practice of the bodhisattva. Because if the practice just resides with the Buddha and a single person's enlightenment alone, then it's not of much use. But the Buddha built the Sangha, after all, taught the Dharma and created the Sangha, the community. That's our community today. Whether we decide, we identify as a Buddhist or not, there's no strict membership requirements in that way. Right? But we avail ourselves of these teachings because they point to the reality of our lives. This is why they're valuable. Nagarjuna described these paramis, the path of the bodhisattva. Someone who wishes to awaken fully. Right? Because I think it's fair to say for most of us, a little bit sleepy in some areas. Right? Maybe not quite awakened fully. Hence, we join a class. We find people to sit with. We said, I could look into this a little deeper. That might be good for me, and it might be good for everyone else around me too. And Nagarjuna then lays out these 6 paramis. The first one on the path of practice. The first one, dana, generosity. Right? And don't worry, this is not a pitch for the cash box in the back. Although, that has its place too, however, right? But just rather generosity as the commitment right at the beginning, number 1, that we wish that someone comes to the point where they wish to live their life for the common good, for the betterment of everybody. That is a powerful, perhaps the most powerful step in the Dharma path. It's just like, I'm not doing this just for me, for what I can get out of it. We might come to practice first at the beginning. That's maybe a natural beginning point. But soon we see, if we have not done so already, That this is a path, this is a way of practice that is good and of benefit to all. That is the natural expression of the self. The self may start small here, but that self, through our practice, through our way, through meditation, and the practice of present awareness, that sphere expands so that it includes people, those around us, family, colleagues, right? Neighbors, community. Like how far can your sphere go? Can it include the people who didn't vote the way you wanted them to? Sometimes that's where it breaks down a little bit. Again, plenty of room to stretch there. But this, this path, generosity, and then the second one, ethical conduct. The Buddha said, wake up to this original wisdom and virtue. But as human beings, again, due to our conditioning, due to everything that ever happened to us, there tends to be some distortion often in human conduct. Is that fair? I think so. Right? And so through our commitment to wishing to live a good, upright life, to be of benefit, to help, from that genuine place of wanting to be of service and help, then we see that it's not enough to just have that intention, but it involves a commitment to a way of living for the betterment of the self and for others. And that involves good conduct, which involves some voluntary restriction. I'm not just going to take mine, get what's good for me at the expense of others. Right? So you have dharma and ethical conduct. I have to go through these quite fast, I guess, because of time. But we could spend a long time here on this. Effort and discipline, the third and fourth. Gosh, isn't that just a great truth of life that you always find, like, whatever it is, there's going to be some work involved. It's going to cost something, right? If it's going to be worthwhile, it's going to require effort. Dharma practice is that way. Long effort. Well, maybe I'm preaching to the choir here when I look around. Long effort in practice. Meditation is that way. You just sit once and then it's all, morning stars and incense. Usually for most of us, it's grinding effort for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, however long that you keep at it. You keep at it. But through that effort and through the discipline of practice, and what I'm calling practice here is when you orient toward living with integrity and as presently and precisely and intimately as you can in all activities of life. Right? That's the commitment, that's the effort and the discipline. And only then we come to the fourth, the fifth and sixth in these paramis, this meditation and wisdom. That we sit. Why do we sit? Master Dogen in the Zen tradition, he had this question that said, if we are all originally enlightened, as the Buddha said, if we're all originally enlightened, why do we have to practice? Right? And somebody asked Dogen, if we're all originally enlightened, if we're all Buddhas, why do we sit? And Dogen succinctly answered, because sitting meditation is the activity of a Buddha. A nice way of saying, because that's what Buddhas do. Right from the beginning, right since Shakyamuni Buddha. Buddhas, like this one here, Buddhas sit. That's the activity of Buddhas. So we give some time to that. We give time to meditation. Right? Because we all live in the ups and downs of the human condition. So if we take some time to put down the ups and downs, to put aside the ups and downs, and to sit in the Buddha's seat. Wherever you are in the room, you're sitting under the Bodhi tree right now. So we practice that. And from that meditation, wisdom develops. realization develops. Not in the realm of knowledge so much with wisdom, like, oh, now I can understand this. Not something that's necessarily cognitively grasped or held in the mind. Doesn't need to be that way. But rather, the deeper wisdom, the great deeper wisdom of being truly at home in yourself and knowing who you are, and that being enough, and that being more than enough. That's wisdom. And so, you know, just as we go into this celebration of Sangha, celebration of community, we know, you know, often as we move into the holiday period, it's a tough time for many. It's a trying time, it's a difficult time for many. There is grief, there is loss, there is suffering, there is difficulty. But there is also love, there is true connection, and there is service and help too. All of it together in this great theatre production we're all involved in. Yeah, so I continue to be grateful and honored to be asked to be in this seat, to share some words, to help the organization. But as I look around, you know, I'm struck, and I continue to be proud that this is truly a community that is, you know, the distributed responsibility, the help that comes from all sides, from all angles. You know, this great varied group of beautiful people that we all are here. And so I really thank you for a year of practice that it just went by, or is going by. You know, but as we turn the corner into the new year, and then we welcome in a new year. And it's an honor to sit and practice alongside you. So, thank you.
Hi, my name's Tim. It's the generosity of people like you that make these videos possible. If you had some benefit from the video and feel an urge to donate, you can make a donation here. If you're interested in seeing more because you're curious, you can click here and see more videos. And if you're interested in subscribing to Long Beach Meditation, you can click here. Thank you so much for your attention. Take care.